Whitlock Hollow, West Virginia, October 12th, 1978. The storm cracked the sky open like bone. For 3 straight nights, rain peeled off the mountain in sheets, drowning the dirt road to Whitlock Hollow and dislodging half the hillside. When the clouds finally broke, a rotting cellar door appeared where no door had been seen in half a century. Locals say the mountain doesn't give up its dead, but this time, it spat them out. Dr. Howard Bell, a regional historian with a reputation for chasing ghost stories, was the first outsider to see what lay inside. He'd come looking for folklore. What he found instead was a trunk, iron-bound and swollen with mold, buried in the collapsed earth beneath the ruins of the Whitlock cabin. Inside the trunk was a collection of journals wrapped in oiled cloth, drawings etched in soot and blood, and the skeletal remains of something that could not be explained. Not then. Not now. Bell didn't speak to the press. Not directly, but in a letter he later mailed to the Folklore Society of America, he wrote, "The remains are not human in any conventional sense. The bone shows signs of partial fusion, 2 spines sharing 1 rib cage, and yet no surgical evidence. 1 skull, no lower jaw, 1 eye socket, a shared mouth. It is not possible, and yet it is." The journals dated back to the late 1800s and belonged to a woman named Edith Whitlock, the last known inhabitant of the Hollow. Her family records had vanished from county files, and the property had long been labeled uninhabitable due to landslide risk. Her writings, however, told a different story. A family line traced back to the early settlers of the Appalachian interior, a bloodline deliberately kept pure. A pregnancy without record, twins born of no father, a second birth without a second person, madness, worship, something buried in the mountain. Bell published only 1 article about his discovery before retiring abruptly. In it, he quoted a single line from Edith's final journal. "We are one tree with hollow branches. My roots are my children. My children are my mouth. The one will speak when the old blood burns away the flesh." The journals are now sealed in the restricted collection at the University of Charleston. The bones were misplaced in federal custody. Some say the humming still echoes from the hollow at night. Some say the one is still watching. Minus Drive on 1-2. The House with No Name. The Whites' Dunier wrote a few minutes. What's to watching? Next, 1. The House with No Name. Makes you fast. The Sinen. The House with No Name. The 7 No Watching. The Sinen. The House with No Name. 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 The house with no name isn't a hen. In this one aware it, the house with no name isn't aware. As we calm down church, how the house with no name isn't a hen. In its writ it says, it's all taken down something. Mourn, how the house with no name isn't a hen. This will be implayed, as will win the damage. And how? And then, the house with no name isn't a hen, as we calm down church. Mourn, how the house with no name isn't a hen. This will be implayed, as will win the damage. And how? And then, the house with no name isn't a hen. This will be implayed, as will win the damage. And how? And then, the house with no name isn't a hen. This will be implayed, as will win the damage. And how? And then, the house with no name isn't a hen. This will be implayed, as will win the damage. The house with no name isn't a hen. This will be implayed, as will when the damage. And how? And then, the house with no name isn't a hen. The house with no name isn't a hen. This will be implayed, as will when the damage. And how? And then, the house with no name isn't a hen. The house with no name isn't a hen. This will be implayed, as will when the damage. And how? And then, the house with no name isn't a hen. The house with no name isn't a hen. There were no roads to the Whitlock house. Not really. Just a trail of packed dirt that forked off the old salt wagon route, veering into brush thick enough to scratch the eyes out of a mule. The path bent uphill like a question no one had ever answered. Edith Whitlock was 12 the last time she left it. She stood barely to her father's chest and spoke only when spoken to. Her voice was soft, but not out of fear. It was trained, quiet, like a blade kept sheathed. She watched everything. Mice under the floorboards, mold that grew teeth-like along the window corners, her father shaking hands as he bled himself again into the glass jar marked Purity. The house had no name, but it had a presence. The rooms were narrow and low, the walls notched with carvings that her father insisted were the markings of the line. A tree etched over and over, sometimes upside down. No branches, just roots. Her mother had died when Edith was 5, or so her father said. There was no grave. We keep to our blood, he told her once, after slapping a traveling preacher across the mouth for stepping too close to the porch. We do not dilute. The Whitlock line is clean, strong. It does not rot like theirs. She asked. Theirs? The ones below, he whispered, as though the sky might hear. Town people. Foreign blood. Railroad bastards. They feed on the weak. The air was always cold inside, no matter the season. Summer flowers bloomed outside but died when brought in. The house refused warmth. And the walls whispered, not all the time, only when she was alone. She would sit in the corner of the loft and hear it, like paper rubbed together or breath caught in the eaves. Sometimes it was singing, low and uneven, as if underwater. She thought, once, that it was her mother, but she never asked. Her father had a locked room on the bottom floor. She was forbidden to enter. That's where the family tree is kept, he said, his eyes always darting, voice thin as thread. Not the kind with bark, the kind that bleeds. Edith learned to be still, learned to walk the floorboards that didn't creak, learned the difference between silence and listening. The house didn't speak in words. It spoke in hums and hunger. She bled for the first time at 13. Her father didn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, he set a bowl in front of her, filled with bitter root tea, and told her, "You are the end and the beginning now. The line must never leave the mountain." That night, she heard something move in the locked room. Not the creak of a floorboard, but a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled slowly across dirt. The next morning, her father's hand was bandaged, and there were new notches on the wall, one deep, one shallow. When she turned 14, he told her, "You may see your brother now." He wasn't in the locked room. The father led her past it, past the place where the dragging sounds came at night, and down a narrow stairwell that hadn't existed the day before. She was certain of it. She'd lived her whole life in this house. She knew every plank, every draft, every nail that bent light at a crooked angle. But now there was a stairwell beneath the stairs, descending into the dark like a secret swallowed whole. Her father didn't carry a lantern. The deeper they went, the warmer it became. Wet warmth, like a mouth breathing close to the skin. Edith didn't ask questions. She knew not to. The walls turned to stone. Roots pushed through the dirt ceiling above, and tiny pale mushrooms glowed faintly from the walls. At the bottom, they reached a chamber, a hollow in the rock. And there, lying curled in a shallow depression in the ground, was her brother. He was naked. His skin was nearly translucent, spider-veined and soft as wax. He had long limbs, too long, and a rib cage that rose and fell rapidly like something bird-like and panicked. His head was large, misshapen, and nearly bald except for a streak of dark hair that curled like ivy. He had one eye. It sat in the center of his forehead. Below it, a mouth, but only half of one, twisted off to the side and rimmed with what looked like old scars or burn marks. It quivered but made no sound. She felt no fear, only confusion. "This is my brother?" she asked quietly. Her father did not answer. He knelt beside the creature and laid a hand on its chest. The thing responded, not with words, not even with movement, but with a sound. A hum. Low, trembling, as if trying to mimic the sound of a voice without understanding language. It resonated in Edith's spine. "Born of your mother, before she passed," her father said. "She gave him to the earth, the first seed." Edith looked at the creature again. It watched her. That eye, too large, too knowing, locked onto hers and did not blink. "He is your kin," her father said. "He is the root. You are the branch, and through you the tree grows again." He pulled a clock from his coat and held it out. Something wet inside. Edith unwrapped it, a lock of hair, her own, cut from her pillow in the night. "You will bleed again, soon," her father said. "And when you do, he will be ready." She did not speak, did not cry, just stared at the thing in the dirt and felt it staring back. She could hear the house above them creak, not with the wind, but like something shifting its weight. Later that night, Edith stood at the attic window. She looked out across the hollow, watching the woods dance in moonlight. From below, in the roots of the house, came a sound, not words, not music. A hum, like something tuning itself to her voice. The house was different now. It breathed. Windows fogged from the inside, even when no fire was lit. Water leaked from places it shouldn't, between wallboards, beneath floorboards, from the ceiling beams. The wood felt warm under her feet, pulsing faintly like a drum under her skin. No birds came near it. No deer. Even the wolves had gone silent. The forest around her had gone still. Edith, now 15, walked among the trees some days, barefoot in the frost, belly rounding beneath her coat. She did not know how to speak of what was happening inside her. She had not lain with a man, but she had bled, and she had drunk the root tea. And her father had said, "The one takes what is his." She hadn't gone back into the hollow room. She didn't have to. She could feel her brother in her blood now. At night, she would wake to humming, not in her ears but in her bones. She began to speak to it without knowing what she said. In the house, listened. The midwife came in January. She was not local, a traveler, passing through the mountains with her pack mule and her iron pot, taking coin and secrets as payment. She was not told where she was going. The Whitlock path had been cleared in a single night, as if the trees themselves had made way. Edith remembered her name only as Magda, though it was likely a false one. The woman was hard, with eyes like black stones and a voice that never once betrayed surprise, even when she saw Edith's stomach writhing beneath her shift like something alive. "They'll come wrong," Magda said, squinting at her. "You know that?" Edith only nodded. "They're already here." The birth took 3 nights. Magda tried to leave on the second. Her horse was gone, her bag torn open. Something had written symbols in the frost outside the cabin, symbols that pulsed faintly red in the snow. She stayed after that, not out of duty but out of something colder, fear perhaps, or fascination. On the 3rd night, Edith screamed until her throat bled. And what came forth was not one child, not 2, but a single being with the pieces of twins, Two torsos fused at the shoulder, a single spine curling upward like a question mark, one arm from each body, and legs that kicked in mirrored rhythm. One eye, one mouth. The eye opened first, wide and white, rolling, unfocused, and then locked directly onto Magda. The midwife dropped the bloody cloth in her hands. "God's teeth," she muttered. But Edith laughed until she coughed blood, laughed until she passed out. The child did not cry. It hummed, low, constant, unbroken. When Edith woke, her father was cradling it, whispering into its mouth, though the thing made no response. Only that humming, like the inside of a hive. Magda was gone by dawn. No one saw her leave, no tracks in the snow, just the sound of something scraping the trees as it moved through the woods. No one came again after that. No visitors, no passers-by, only the house, settling into something colder, tighter. Edith named the child the One. She tried to feed it, and it latched with that twisted mouth, but it didn't drink. Its skin never wrinkled, never dried. It never cried. Only watched her with that single eye and hummed. The hum never stopped. Some nights, she could hear it inside her dreams. Not words, not music, but the suggestion of both, as though the child were not speaking to her, but through her. The One was growing, and Edith was shrinking. By midsummer, the One was walking. It did not walk like a child. It moved silently, as if the air made room for it. Its fused limbs shuffled without rhythm, sometimes dragging, sometimes floating just above the floorboards, as though it could not decide whether it belonged to the world or not. One foot would move, then the other, then both at once. It made no sound except the hum. The hum had changed. It pulsed now, rose and fell. It followed Edith from room to room, even when the One was sleeping. The house vibrated faintly when it made the sound, walls expanding and contracting like lungs, floorboards swelling with wetness. Her father began scratching at his arms again, muttering about impurities in the grain. He stopped eating meat, said it was filthy with memory. He boiled bark and drank his own urine for weeks, writing symbols across the windows to keep out what he called the lesser blood. Edith said nothing. She barely spoke at all anymore. She watched the One. It had learned her patterns. When she woke, it was already there. When she turned, it followed. It could not speak, but it understood. Not in the way children do, but in the way mirrors do, reflecting her back at herself, twisted and unblinking. Its eye never blinked. She found it one night in her room, scratching circles into the wall with its fingernail. Inside the circles, tiny trees with no branches, just roots. By autumn, it had grown taller than her. She should have been alarmed, but she wasn't. It didn't seem unnatural anymore. It simply was, the way thunder simply was, or the mountain, or the endless humming that now echoed from within the chimney, even when the fire was out. And she had begun to change too. Her hair was falling out in clumps. Not from illness, her scalp was smooth, unblemished. Her nails had turned black at the edges, and her skin no longer burned in sunlight, but instead turned gray and tight, like dried clay. She stopped menstruating. In her dreams, her mouth was gone. She had no face. She spoke through the One, and then came the drawings. The One drew in soot, in mud, in blood when it could find some. On walls, floors, on the skin of dead animals it dragged in from the forest. Always the same thing. A tree, inverted. Its roots above, its branches buried deep below. Sometimes the roots were made of veins. Sometimes they were made of people. Edith found her father dead in November. He was sitting upright in the root cellar, hands folded across his chest, eyes open but pale as fog. A smile split his lips wide, too wide. His throat had been torn open from the inside. A single word was carved into the wall behind him. She did not cry. She covered him with a sheet and left him where he sat. That night, the One crawled into her bed. It wrapped its arms around her waist. It hummed louder than ever. And she understood it. Not the words, not exactly, but the meaning underneath, the old knowing, the thing in the soil, the truth of what had been growing in the Whitlock line since before there was a name for people, before language, before shame. The house didn't breathe anymore. It listened. And in the hollow silence, Edith began to speak back, not in words, but in mouthless sounds. And the one responded, as though her voice had always been its own. There was no memory of the act, no moment she could point to, no touch, no breath, only the knowing. She awoke one morning to a bloodless womb and a belly beginning again to swell. She did not question it. The one had chosen. The house no longer resembled a house. Moss grew from the rafters. Roots split the floorboards. Flies moved in clouds that never touched Edith or the one, but circled the upstairs windows like orbiting eyes. The air inside hung heavy, rich with the smell of iron and rot, sweet as overripe fruit. There was no calendar, no sense of time. The sun rarely touched the hollow now. Even in noon daylight, the shadows clung like oil to the trees. Edith moved like a ghost between the rooms, humming low, in mimicry of her child, her brother, her seed, herself. The one had begun drawing again. Now the drawings moved. She would wake to find soot-dark sketches on the walls, limbs too long, eyes too many, mouths with roots for teeth, and by nightfall they would stretch, twist, fade into the wood, leaving behind stains that oozed when touched. Once, she saw a face in the ceiling beams, her own. It blinked. Her belly grew faster this time, violently so. In 2 months, she could barely walk. Her spine bent with the weight. Something inside her thrashed not like a child, but like a nest of serpents sharing one skin. Her ribs bruised from within. Her teeth loosened and fell out one by one. The one sat at the edge of her bed every night, humming, not comfort, not lullaby, instruction. She began to hum back. Harmony. The tones never matched, yet created something between them. An echo that traveled not through the air, but through the walls. The house post that had become womb. On the 7th month, Edith began preparing the ritual. She no longer ate food. The one would bring her black water from the well, thick and warm, and she drank it without gagging. It gave her strength, gave her visions. She saw the first Whitlocks, carving trees upside down into cave walls. She saw her father drinking his blood in silence, praying to something that had no name. She saw herself as a girl reaching into the fire and not burning. She saw the one, fully formed, unbroken, standing at the edge of the woods, calling to her without sound. She no longer wrote in her journal. She carved instead symbols into wood, into her own skin, into the walls, the same shapes, again and again. Roots, mouths, spirals. On the night of the birth, she stood upright. There was no pain. The one held her hand and the floor beneath him softened like wet earth. She bled, but the blood was black. It hissed where it touched the air. The child was born in silence. No crying, no breath. But it opened its eyes, 3 of them, and looked at her and smiled. The one leaned forward, placed its single eye to the newborn's forehead. They hummed together. The sound cracked the ceiling. The trees outside bent toward the house, groaning, and Edith screamed, not in agony, but in ecstasy, because the voice that came from her mouth was no longer hers alone. It was theirs. It was the tree. It was the branch, hollowing out for bloom. The house had no doors anymore. The wood had sealed itself, curling inward like the petals of a rotting flower. Windows grew over with thick bark, leaving only slivers of light filtered through sap-streaked glass. The walls were warm to the touch, too warm, pulsing with a slow, heavy rhythm that no longer mimicked breath. It was heartbeat now. The one no longer walked. It hovered, drifted, hung near the ceiling, limbs long and limp, like roots pulled from wet earth. Its eye had split, one above, one below, and in between a new mouth had formed, a perfect oval. The The infant, the second seed, was not an infant anymore. It did not grow upward, but outward. Limbs bloomed from its torso like branches, curling in symmetrical spirals. Its face had no symmetry. Its mouths came and went. Its eyes blinked across its chest, across its back. Some black, some blind, some open even in sleep. It never cried, never made a sound. It only listened to Edith, to the one, to the house. Edith's skin was no longer skin. It had hardened into something smooth and pale, almost bark-like, patterned with the symbols she'd once carved by hand. Her hair never returned, but her skull glowed faintly in the dark. She did not eat. She did not sleep. She only wrote. Her fingers, soaked in ink made from her blood, crafting new pages for the journals that now spanned entire rooms. And when she wasn't writing, she was drawing. Thousands of trees, all upside down, no branches, only roots. But now, the roots reached upward, the something above. Her voice was gone. Her vocal cords had twisted, but still she spoke. Through the mouths of the children, the one on one side, the second seed on the other. Her words came warped, echoing, low and liquid like they were spoken underwater. The branch must split to bloom. The hollow sings when filled with flesh. We are the root that eats the sky. One night, the forest answered. Trees bent inward toward the house, groaning in unison. Owls flew in circles above the hollow, blind and screaming. The stream behind the hill turned black, and fish rose to the surface with human eyes. Deep in the earth, something began to rise. A sound. No, not a sound. A presence. It came up through the foundation, through the rotted floorboards, through the one and the second seed, and Edith herself, until they stood together in the center of the house, humming one single note in three mouths. The walls cracked, the roof folded back like petals under frost, and from above, the moon stared down. It had one eye. That night, Edith carved her final message into the stone hearth. A warning or a prophecy? No one could tell. The one will speak when the root devours the branch and the sky swallows the tree. And then she lay down beside her children. They did not die. They simply sank into the floor, into the roots, into the hollow that waited for them. The house sealed itself once more, and for 50 years, there was only silence. They brought the bones out in black plastic, not coffins. Two partial skeletons, fused together at the rib cage. One skull with a malformed jaw. Extra vertebrae. No pelvis, just calcified twists where the hips might have been. A third, smaller skeleton was found beneath them, curled tight like an animal, with 4 arms and an eye socket in the center of its forehead. No one could explain them. Dr. Howard Bell didn't try. He sat on the back of his Jeep, coat soaked in mist, staring at the unearthed stone foundation of the Whitlock house. It had been buried beneath the hillside for decades, until a landslide, triggered by 3 nights of heavy rain, split the soil and exposed it like a rotted tooth. Inside, the crew had found a collapsed stairwell, roots growing downward. And under those roots, a trunk. Inside the trunk, journals wrapped in wax cloth, ink darkened with age, pages stuck together with what might have once been blood. And in the center of the topmost journal, carved carefully with a woman's fingernail, we are one tree with hollow branches. My roots are my children. My children are my mouth. Bell had seen things in his career. Borderland folktales, witch trials, cannibal diaries from the early settlers, but nothing like this. He didn't publish the full account. He tried. But when he submitted the findings to the University of Charleston, the journals were quietly sealed. The bones went missing en route to a federal archive in D.C. A week later, Bell received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid. A wall. covered in soot and mud. A tree drawn upside down. From its roots, something hung, limbless, eyeless, humming. On the back of the photo, the one is still watching. The path to Whitlock Hollow is overgrown now. Locals won't go near it. Children are told stories about the house with no doors, about the woman who gave birth to silence, about the family who became roots. But every so often, hikers disappear. And on fog-heavy nights, if you stand on the hill and listen closely, you might hear it. A hum, low, wordless, waiting, because the branches are hollow and something has begun to speak.